Good afternoon, and welcome to a webinar about the Southern IPM Center Enhancement Grant RFA. Thank you all for showing up. We're always excited when our RFA comes out, and we'd love to see good applications come back in for projects. So we kind of see this as an opportunity to help let you know more about the RFA. At this point, most of you have probably downloaded it, taken a couple looks through it, and might have some questions that have come up. We're essentially going to walk through the RFA, so it's nothing secret. Everything that we're going to talk about has already been published in that document. We're just helping to explain some of it. While we're going through it, if you happen to have a question, you have a chat window or the ability to send in questions. Put them up there, and we'll answer them as we can going through this. So with me today, I'm Joe LaForest, one of the co-directors for the Southern IPM Center. I'm located in bright and shiny Tifton, Georgia. We also have with us Jean-Jacques Dubois, who is the evaluation specialist for the IPM Center. He's in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we've got the other co-director for the Southern IPM Center, which is Denisha Seth-Carley. She's on because she deals with all the fun stuff with the grant administration, and I know how much you all love that kind of paperwork. So she's on in case we run into questions regarding that. So without any further ado, we're going to go into what we're seeing here in the RFA. There's 18 pages or so that we've put together describing this funding opportunity and helping you know more about it. The Southern IPM Center is funded by a grant from USDA NIFA, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, through the Crop Protection Pest Management Program. And out of our entire budget, we set aside a portion of that for enhancement grants. Grants which often start up with small projects or working groups to help facilitate communication within the region, or working on small projects, seed projects, or other projects to kind of finish up the work being done from larger works. So as you can imagine, we're the Southern IPM Center. All projects have to in some way relate back to integrated pest management. We're trying to advocate that and foster the development and adoption of that throughout the region, and actually between regions as well. This year, there is approximately $230,000 that are available for grants. So that's the total pool that these grants will be pulled from this year. Most of the projects range somewhere between $10,000 to $40,000, depending on the type of project they've applied for and what they need to do. The project periods for all projects can start on March 1, 2017, and have to end by February 28, 2018. They are only one-year projects. And with these grants, they do allow indirect cost, up to 30% total federal funds, or the equivalent, which is 42.86 of total direct cost. If your university happens to have a lower negotiated rate with USDA NIFA, like at University of Georgia, my rate is 30% modified total direct cost. That's an extra 12.86% that can be put into my project for direct cost. So you do need to check with your grants office to make sure you've got the right indirect cost rate, and they are allowed. In terms of who can apply for these projects, it's a wide assortment of folks. It is not limited to specifically land-grant universities, although they are included. It can include four-year universities, businesses, commodity organizations, government and non-governmental organizations. It's a pretty broad swath of who can be involved for these projects. They do need to be within the southern region, and the states for the southern region are listed here. So you can see the variety of different partners we look at. These projects are also meant to be regional in scope and have the ability to work within the entire region. We fully realize that $30,000, especially after indirect cost, does not go that far. So the project may not have cooperators in every single state. It may actually have most of the resources and funding put into one state or one location. But there are cooperators who are working with it, or the concepts addressed in the project would apply to other areas in the region, and those people have put in letters of support or indicated that this would be important to them. We're getting the project types a little more down below, just because there's a little more detail in what's here in the RFA. In addition to the funding that's provided, there's also a wide variety of expertise that is given to any of our grantees. So this section here is actually describing technological support that's available. Many of you know me from my work with the Bugwood Center at University of Georgia, but we also do a lot just with the Southern IPM Center in terms of making technology accessible to folks that need it. There's a lot of resources that have already been built, and so if you don't need to recreate the wheel, all this technology is available to support your project. Or if you just need a sounding board to know whether or not a certain approach would work for technology and incorporating that into a project, we're available to answer those questions. So my contact information at the end of the RFA regarding that. We have a lot of resources that go into reporting where different pests are, mapping that, images, other materials for outreach. We also have, it's listed later, evaluation support, that if you call and talk to Jean-Jacques Dubois, he's more than happy to talk to you about your plans for evaluation, making sure they make sense, and making sure they would integrate well with how we have to report outcomes for our projects up to NIFA and also out to our other stakeholders. The deadline for all grants this year is November 18th, 2016. We set that there mainly to make sure we didn't ruin anyone's Thanksgiving. It's about 6 weeks from when we released the RFA to having it due. For many grants, that would be an extremely short time period. However, for the way our grant is set up for the narrative, it actually simplifies a whole lot of the application process. So we think this is still a decent amount of time to put this together. Going through the RFA, you've got this section here that talks about the purpose of the IPM centers and where we're looking at. Many of you by this point have made yourselves familiar with NIFA's IPM roadmap to help coordinate IPM in the region and build timely responses to emerging issues, help improve communication, promote development and adoption of IPM, help build teams, all the things you see listed there. These are things that are good to look at when creating your project, because you can make sure that you're aligning with the goals that NIFA has set out in that IPM roadmap. I mentioned before that there are several different types of projects that are available through the grant program. The first one that we have are called seed projects. These have a funding cap of $30,000, and typically are projects that are going to initiate or try out some new techniques in IPM or different strategies for approaching IPM. They are meant to be fairly early on work, getting enough baseline data in order to pursue larger grants like AFRI or Specialty Crop Research Initiative. They're meant to start things up. And capstone projects are meant that you have a project where you've kind of gotten to the end, but if it really had this one section for outreach, or if we learn this additional information to help support the project and figure out where to go next, this would really tie everything together and make things come together. So capstone projects also have a funding cap of $30,000 that can be $30,000 that can be used to help pull things together and finish things up. So seed projects and capstone projects tend to be very similar, but at the beginning and end of larger works. We then come to our working group projects, which are an interesting beast within the RRFA. We realize that in order for people to get things done, especially on a regional basis, there's a need for there to be lots of communication. And sometimes it takes at least a year for people to get together just to meet, discuss the issues that are currently on the table, figure out where things are supposed to go, and from there have a set of priorities that lead in future project development, knowing what directions to go into, what places to look to effectively achieve solutions in the region. So our working group projects are aimed directly at that. And with this, we've kind of focused on whether or not you are an existing working group or a new working group. So if you're a new group, you realize that there's a situation going on in the region, and you really need to pull together a critical mass of people to discuss an issue, figure out where to go from there, because this is starting to cause some significant issues. It's a new pest, or it's just an issue that people really haven't addressed before. There are $10,000 that are available just for the group to get together, meet, have that first interaction, and develop their priorities, develop their communication mechanisms, and set themselves up as a group. These are qualified in the grant as team building activities. It's the meeting, it's the organization, it's what has to happen to get that group together, including travel funds to allow people from all over to come together to one location and get that all put together. So a new working group could apply just for team building activities. We had 2 this last year that actually formed. They put in a grant for only $10,000. One was the Southern Brown Marmorated Stink Bug Working Group. They came together at Byron, Georgia, and had a day and a half of meeting on what their objectives were going to be for the group to look at brown marmorated stink bug in the southern region. Another one is the Cowpea Curculio, or the Southern Pea Working Group, which was started up, and they're having a meeting just to come together, figure out what their main priorities are, do some surveying of what's going on in the region regarding pests on Southern Pea, and figuring out where they want to go next. So both examples of groups just coming together, meeting, and that's all their project was involved with. Other groups that have been existing working groups or have enough of a running start with their group that they said, we want to do the team building, but we also want to go and do these output-based activities. We know there are things that we can generate that will help people now. And so they still have their meeting for $10,000, their team building activities, but then in their grant they include a second portion, which is their output-based activities, which can go up to $30,000. That gives them a total grant of $40,000. This is generally available to new working group, or sorry, existing working groups. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've been funded by the Southern IPM Center before, but the group has provided enough documentation in their background and the expertise they're bringing to the project that we understand the group already exists. They already know how to communicate. They already have priorities set. In that case, they're well positioned to take on not only forming that group in the first year, but also taking on additional work, which is the outcome or the output-based activities. So you start getting this mix of, well, some people only apply for $10,000 just to build the team. Some folks may apply for $40,000 to both do their team building and have a project. Other groups may just apply for a project, saying that we already have funding to meet as a team. We don't need to worry about that, but we want to get a project done. And so they apply only for $30,000. So work groups start giving us a whole lot of interesting combinations of what comes out of that. And so that's kind of what you're seeing here with this table defining new and existing working groups and the funding limits. It's really all about that $10,000 for just meeting and getting together versus what's needed for the project. So figuring that out gets to be a little bit of fun, but not too bad. For any of that, if there are ever any questions, you're welcome to call us up, and we're a great sounding board for a lot of different activities and ideas. That's why we are here. That's why we list all of our contact information on some of the last pages of the RFA. we already talked about eligibility earlier on. Again, these are southern region projects. This doesn't eliminate folks from other regions from participating, but the main effort should be focused and be applicable to the southern region. And we already stated once, but I'll state it again, November 18th, mark it on your calendar. At 5 p.m., we shut down the proposal system. So if your grant is not in by 5 p.m. Eastern time, which can be fun for you on Central time, that's the deadline that we have. We close the door and things are where they're at. All of the proposal preparation and submission will be online through our system. Links are throughout the document that provide you the direct links to that. We're not using grants.gov. We're using the proposal management system that all the IPM centers use. And there are details here on how to go through that. There's also a video online that we'll send out the links for. And it tells you how to go through the proposal system and use it. Sometimes some folks like the written description of how to do that. Other folks like to watch the YouTube video and see what to click. Most of the stuff is pretty straightforward in terms of what you see for your submission forms and cover and the cover sheet and assurances forms that go with the grant. So these are fairly straightforward things that you've seen probably with most other grants you've applied for. At this point, I'm actually going to turn it over to Jean-Jacques Dubois, our evaluation specialist, and he's going to go into more of the meat of the logic model and project narrative that we've developed.
So one thing you need to remember about the way this proposal works is that the logic model, the narrative, the scoring sheet, which you will find in the RFA, and after a year the reporting will all match each other perfectly. They will, all the sections of it will align perfectly. Therefore, you can look at the entire narrative as an expansion, an expanded version of the logic model, or the logic model as a bullet point summary of the narrative. I would encourage you, of course, to look at the reporting ahead of time to see what you will need to do at the end, and also to look at the panel score sheet for the proposal, which is what the panelists, the independent panelists, will follow in looking at your proposal. Now, the logic model template is available as a Word document. It's a table. There is one version that you see here on my screen that has examples of the sort of thing you might include in each of the sections, right? And you also have a blank section, a blank template here. You will turn in one of these, of course. As you fill this out, we expect you to delete the example contents. Let me see, we might want to go back to the narrative form, which is the expanded version of the logic model. And the basic structure of this is the situation priorities, the inputs, the outputs, and the outcomes, right? And the outputs being the difference between outputs and outcomes. All of this is, I think, carefully explained here. The difference between outputs and outcome being that the outputs are the things that you're going to do, the things you're going to make, and the outcomes are the effects of those on your audience, or on the state of things in general, on the situation, which is what you started up with. In the logic model, we expect you to give panelists an idea of what you expect the long-term effects, the long-term outcomes to be, just so that they can build for themselves a picture of the validity and the viability rather of your project. And however, when in the narrative section, you will find, let me see, tables such as this one, right? That should only include the things that you expect to happen within the time limit of the project. We're aware, of course, that many outcomes, long-term outcomes in particular, will not happen within the 1 year period. Do report them, you know, your expectation of those long-term outcomes, do report them in the logic model. You do not need to include them in the narrative section. And again, this is carefully explained in the RFA. Joe, can you think of anything else I should?
I think you covered the sections of that fairly well.
Okay, very good. Any questions?
So far, no questions.
Okay. Very good.
We'll jump it back over to my side of the screen. So Jean-Jacques went through the different sections of the proposal narrative. You'll see throughout the RFA we try to really ask that you cite stakeholder input. The way that we have our panel set up, the panels are people that come from agriculture or come from the world of IPM, depending on what setting they're practicing IPM in, even schools and structures. But they may not be an expert in your particular commodity. And for them to be able to know that these things are important to the folks in the region and will actually affect your stakeholders, if there are cited priorities somewhere, it's a good idea to reference those. If there's economic numbers out there of how much yield loss there is, or how much the commodity's worth, or where it's distributed, those are also great things to have in that background and justification section of your narrative. I'd also say letters of support. Knowing that there are people out there who thought enough of your project to write a letter of support endorsing what you're doing and saying, this is something that we need this desperately, and it's something that will help contribute to either the development or IPM or the profitability of what we're doing and make this actually work. Those are very powerful things that our panels take into consideration. So if you can get some of those together, that definitely helps your application. Outside of the proposal narrative and the logic model, there will also be a section for the cooperation of key personnel and units involved. That helps us know who's undertaking the work and where some of their expertise lies. You're also going to find forms online in our system for the budget. Our budget form is in Excel, so you don't have to worry about the grants.gov budget form, which can make you want to pull your hair out. This is a little more straightforward for figuring out what your budget is. And a budget justification or narrative, which is also provided with it. All these forms you can download once you go onto the website and go to actually apply for the RFA. You then also have your standard forms for current and pending support, conflict of interest, the CVs of all your key personnel. And we do have our evaluation criteria at the end, so you can see exactly how the panel is going to read your RFA. And as Jean-Jacques mentioned, it lines up very well from the logic model to the project narrative to the evaluation criteria. The easier you make it on a panelist to read your proposal and look between those three and go, I see exactly how this flow goes and I know how I can score, the happier the panelist will be. Jim Van Kirk was famous for saying, you really don't want to get your panelists upset with you when you're applying for a grant. So do everything you can to make things clear and transparent. And we think following the RFA with how we have it aligned will allow you to do that. You then have our contact information at the end of the RFA. You are welcome at any time to email us, call us on the phone, look us up. You see us at a meeting, hunt us down. We are here to provide feedback to you. If you have questions, is this applicable for the grant program? We're happy to have those discussions about what resources we have with the evaluation specialists and technology. If you also want to comment about the RFA, we spend a lot of time putting this together, writing it, revising it. We try to make it consistent so that people know what to expect from year to year, and we know there's always room for improvement. So here you have pretty much the list of folks that if you want to have feedback into how these things come out, what language you're seeing in there and understanding it more, this is the list of folks that really can provide that for you. So fairly straightforward RFA from our standpoint. We always feel that way because, well, we wrote it. But most of the comments we've had from folks support that they understand where we're going with this and understand. Again, you've got our contact information. You wake up at 2 in the morning and have a hot burning question, put that in email. Don't call me. But please contact us. Let us know. We're available to answer any questions you have, and we'll make sure to get back to you and help provide some clarification. If you have any other things, you know where to contact us. So thank you all for attending the webinar.